Album ritratti, Lura Fiz-Zmien,
Lura Fiz-Zmien,
pajjiż motiħor, millina fien, titħabbek miegħu bla ma trid u kemm nixtieq impara l-ftit li jerġa' dak iż-żmien mill-ġdid. Li jerġa' dak iż-żmien mill-ġdid.
Lura Fiz-Zmien niġu għattini parti fej se nkomplu naraw dana id-dokumentarju The Real Truth About Titanic.
Imagine what the newspapers would have done with something like that. White Star ship fails to sail on time. How would that look? Who's buying the next set of tickets, right? I think their finances were so fragile, it could have brought White Star down.
Meanwhile, we have this fire that's roaring away and nobody has attended to it. But this was madness, sending a ship with a fire like this
absolutely
to sea.
How many people would have gotten off if you'd have said, well, folks, there's a fire burning down below. I think I might have gotten off that ship.
They're making dangerous decisions that everything is going to be all right and they're going to sail come what may. This ship is sailing no matter what.
That's right.
The Titanic pushed ahead on schedule. She made a brief stop at Queenstown in Ireland before steaming west towards America. The passengers were still completely unaware that beneath their feet the fire was now so intense it was endangering the ship's steel structure. As the Titanic headed off on its maiden voyage, passengers promenaded on the luxuriously wide upper decks, settling in for a 6-day journey to New York. They were totally unaware that in the bowels of the ship, a fire was raging. Men were battling to extinguish a blaze in a 3-story high coal bunker. Despite the fire, the captain had steamed into open ocean. It was a decision that would have tragic consequences. In the aftermath of the sinking, the British government were pressured into setting up an inquiry. It was held in the Scottish Drill Hall in London.
Oh my God.
Holy.
Wow. I've seen many, many pictures of it, but the photographs don't even come close to doing it justice.
This is a shrine to what happened and all the evidence that was given.
It's amazing.
The inquiry was overseen by Commissioner Lord Mersey, and more than 100 people were called to give evidence. Most were top brass from the shipping company. For 11 days, the coal bunker fire was barely mentioned. But then, after being denied 2 times, Thomas Lewis, the leader of the Firemen's Union, won the right to question his men.
We finally get some firemen into the witness box and Tommy Lewis starts driving towards the fire.
The first to be questioned was one of the replacement crew who boarded at Southampton, Charles Hendrickson.
They ask Hendrickson,
when did you start getting the coal out?
First watch we did from Southampton, we started to get it out.
they only began tackling the fire after the ship sailed.
Bunker 10 held more than 100 tons of coal, only accessible via 2 hatches. The only way to deal with the fire was to shovel the burning coal into the engine furnaces.
So they were moving the coal around while it was on fire into the boilers. Yeah.
3 days into the voyage, Hendrickson and his team are still shoveling the burning coal.
It took us right up to the Saturday to get it out.
But once the coal was out, Hendrickson discovered evidence of the extreme temperature generated inside the bunker.
The bulkhead forms part of the bunker, the side. Yes, you could see
Where the bulkhead had been red hot.
Red hot. This is incredible. This is one of the ship's major protections.
Right.
And it's burning red hot. That seems to me like a very big deal indeed.
The steel wall that had taken the brunt of the fire was one of the Titanic's main bulkheads. The bulkheads divided the hull into separate watertight compartments. In the event of a breach in the hull, they stopped water flooding the entire ship. The fireman at the inquiry revealed that the bulkhead had been severely damaged by the fire.
and he says, it was dented. The bottom of the watertight compartment was warped.
This is so important. This is a crucial area to defend the ship against the ocean coming in.
That's amazing.
A warped bulkhead should have raised serious concerns. But incredibly, the damage was just covered over.
And Hendrickson says, I just brushed it off and got some black oil and rubbed over it to give it its ordinary appearance. What in tarnation was going on with the control of the ship, the senior officers?
Despite these revelations, throughout the inquiry, Lord Mersey seemed uninterested in the fire and eager to move on.
Commissioner Lord Mersey doesn't want to know.
Right.
He was making repeated interruptions and closing it down whenever they tried to develop the fire story to see where it went. Do let us confine ourselves to the real, serious issues of this inquiry. That fire in the bunker has nothing to do with it.
This is a phenomenal piece of information, and Mersey doesn't want to hear any of it.
The Titanic was now just under 3 days from New York. This was one of the Titanic's first-class lounges. Only the wealthiest passengers on board enjoyed these luxurious salon suites. But as guests relaxed, on the bridge, Captain Edward Smith and White Star Chairman Bruce Ismay were receiving wireless warnings that icebergs were drifting into the ship's path. And although the burning coal in Bunker 6 had now been cleared, astonishing new evidence reveals that the red-hot bulkhead had caused the fire to spread.
I've come across an article in the New York Tribune from Saturday, April the 20th, 1912. The story was first told by an officer. He's saying the fire was in the coal bunkers, plural, coal bunkers, not one. And this is giving accurate information. He says it was in stokeholds 9 and 10. Here we have evidence of spread into not one bunker, but two.
Firemen were now frantically clearing out a second bunker, throwing even more coal into the furnaces. Could this new information explain one of the greatest mysteries of the Titanic disaster? Inexplicably, despite the warnings, the Titanic maintained course and accelerated to top speed into the ice field. The Titanic wasn't trying to set a record time for a transatlantic crossing. She simply wasn't fast enough. So why did she hit top speed? A second fire, causing tons more burning coal to be emptied into her furnaces, could finally explain the mystery.
That huge amount of coal being transferred into the hungry furnaces faster than they would like. This is the impelling, driving force that is feeding into a ship. She's now at 22.5 knots, charging towards her destiny.
Richard de Kerbrick, a world authority on coal-powered ships, is surprised by the second fire.
The fact that they were emptying these bunkers, fighting two bunkers, could that have played its own role?
Yes, indeed. And this is a relevant thing which has affected the performance of the ship.
But why wouldn't the captain slow the ship to a safe speed as she approached the ice? One factor may have been overlooked. The country was in the middle of a miners' strike, and the Titanic had taken on just enough fuel to make it to New York. The fires had already burned through her stock. Would losing momentum now waste more of her dwindling supply?
Well, if she was to slow down, then when to pile on the speed again, that would increase your coal consumption. If it's at a premium, we're going to run short.
The Titanic didn't have the coal reserves left to do anything more than maintain speed and stick to her course.
So the combination of all these events and scenarios had backed them into a corner. Does that all make sense?
That does make sense. It seems to be a logical sequence. When you first put it to me about this fire, I hadn't put too much stock on it. But seeing the evidence you've placed before me, I think you lit another fire under this investigation.
When J. Bruce Ismay and Captain Smith read the ice warnings, the possibility of hitting an iceberg seemed unlikely, while the danger of running out of fuel in the middle of the Atlantic was very real.
Just consider, she's on a maiden voyage, carrying a gaggle full of millionaires on board who've got arrangements and shares to look at when they get to New York. They weren't to foresee the strike of the iceberg, but they could foresee not arriving in New York because they ran out of coal. That would be damage to prestige and the PR for a White Star.
Against the higher risk of embarrassment, they chose to go with the lower risk of catastrophe, and they gambled.
You could say that, yes.
The gamble backfired. At 11:40 p.m., the Titanic collided with an iceberg. But it wasn't the ice alone that claimed the ship. In the last hours, the fire had one final deadly role to play in the disaster. A mysterious dark mark on the Titanic's hull has opened up an important new chapter in the story of the ship's sinking. Senan Maloney believes a serious coal fire below decks accelerated the ship directly into an ice field. At 11:40 p.m. on the 14th of April 1912, 400 miles off the coast of Newfoundland, the Titanic struck an iceberg. The collision punctured the forward starboard side of the hull. But the bulkheads held firm, and a rescue vessel was not far away.
There was no reason why Titanic couldn't have lasted an hour and a half longer. Carpathia would have reached it and no one would have died.
The ship's designer clearly agreed. He assessed the damage and said the ship would not sink, but only if critical bulkheads held. What he did not know is that one of the bulkheads in question had been badly damaged. Buried in the transcripts of the American inquiry, Senon believes he has found the final event that triggered the ship's sudden sinking.
So the American inquiry was brilliant in that initial surge of enthusiasm in drawing out some key answers.
Lead fireman Fred Barrett had fought the coal bunker fire and was in boiler room 6 at the very moment when the ship hit the iceberg. As seawater flooded in, he took refuge behind the very bulkhead warped by the fire.
When I turned to the evidence of Fred Barrett, I'm further reinforced in my idea that something serious is happening here, and at a very crucial period.
Around 2 hours after the collision, Barrett says something drastically changed. He describes a torrent of water crashing through the fire-damaged bulkhead.
I saw a wave of green foam come tearing through between the boilers.
This breach sealed the ship's fate.
When that wall of steel goes, we have a series of tipping dominoes, and this is the critical failure that suddenly gives the upper hand to the ocean.
An academic study has shown that at this precise moment, the ship started to sink rapidly. Within 30 minutes, the chronometer on the bridge was beneath the waves. Fireman Barrett's evidence directly links the failure of the damaged bulkhead to the ship's final fate. But was it the fire that caused it to give way?
That's where we have to go, and I need to find out whether the fire could have played a much more crucial part than we ever thought before in the Titanic story.
Working together, Dr. Guillermo Rain and metallurgist Dr. Martin Strangwood have estimated the damage the fires would have had on the ship's steel structures. Their conclusions are significant.
Good to see you.
How are you? Meet Martin.
Hi there.
Expert in metallurgy. We have conducted experiments in my lab at Imperial. So what the bulkhead does is the hot part bulges. It's a significant bulge out.
Very noticeable.
The blue is that actually it bulges inwards. So it doesn't bulge all of it out, there is a part of it that bulges in.
So you get a buckling of the plate.
You have like a wave across the bulkhead.
This is the first time scientific analysis has been used to predict the extent of the damage caused by the fire. And it matches the eyewitness accounts from the Titanic firemen to a remarkable degree.
That is absolutely amazing, gentlemen, because I will tell you what was said in 1912 in this exact section we're talking about. The bottom of the watertight bulkhead was dinged aft, and the other part was dinged forward.
This is what you see here.
It's amazing, isn't it?
That's precisely what we are predicting.
According to the computer model, this type of warping only happens at very high temperatures. It confirms historic reports of the damage, and that the fire was far more significant than the inquiry suggested. The effect of the heat on the bulkhead steel would have been catastrophic.
The strength will change. How much it can resist cracking will change. It's going to be a quarter of the strength that it has at room temperature, which is why it deforms so much. So if you have a gradual build-up of water, the force on the steel is high enough to cause a crack, and then the brittleness of the steel means that crack spreads right across in a very catastrophic manner.
Wow, it went through. This is amazing.
This modern analysis underpins the story told by the Titanic firemen.
From the day we sailed, The Titanic was on fire.
The coal bunker fire fatally weakened the steel to a quarter of its original strength.
You could see where the bulkhead had been red hot.
Eventually the water pressure took its toll, and the brittle bulkhead gave way.
I saw a wave of green foam come tearing through between the boilers.
I find this new theory that has been put together entirely credible, and I'm impressed.
This now, to my mind, revolutionizes our understanding of how the Titanic sank.
The failure of the fire-damaged bulkhead is central to the huge loss of life on the Titanic. The bulkheads were the sole reason the Titanic carried so few lifeboats. If they'd held, the ship would have stayed afloat long enough for everyone to be ferried to a rescue vessel. Instead, 1,500 men, women and children plunged to their deaths in the icy Atlantic water. The most shocking aspect of this investigation is that all this evidence was available to the inquiry in 1912. So why has it taken so long to come to light? Shannon believes it's because the ship's owners hid the truth.
I don't blame the firemen or the trimmers. They were doing what they were told. There's a culture of cover-up within the White Star Line.
As soon as he was on the rescue ship, Chairman J. Bruce Ismay sent telegrams ahead to White Star HQ in New York. Shannon believes he was already making plans to stop the truth getting out.
Ismay has just survived the most traumatic event of his life. And what is his first concern? It's to send telegrams in a code word. His name backwards from Ismay to Yamsey. And I quote, "Think most unwise, keep Titanic crew until Saturday. Most undesirable, have crew New York so long." He wants the firemen brought back to England as quickly as possible. He wants them out of there. He wants them to keep quiet.
White Star told the American inquiry that no fireman had survived. Yet fireman Fred Barrett was still working in their service. At the British inquiry, Lord Mersey, a patron of the Shipbuilders Guild, didn't call 57 surviving firemen and brushed over the evidence of those who did appear. Mersey concluded that the disaster was an unavoidable accident caused by excessive speed and made no mention of the fire. It's taken 105 years and Shannon's investigation finally to reveal the full story.
These anomalies has given us the truth, and that the story of the RMS Titanic really is one of fire and ice.
ليرجع ذاك الزمن من جديد.
Sabiħ, u minn dak li rajna f'dan id-dokumentarju, indunajtu illi kien hemm raġunijiet oħra, mhux biss għax ħabat mal-iceberg. Rajna kif iddajja fanki l-istil skont dan id-dokumentarju. Rajna illi dak l-album ta' ritratti li tfaċċa ta' evidenza ġdida u ta' investigazzjoni ġdida, ħoloq li issir investigazzjoni ġdida dwar dawn il-ġrajiet. Semmaru għal pawsa oħra ta' riklami, it-tieni pawsa. Meta niġu lura fit-tielet parti, tielet u l-aħħar parti tal-programm tagħna llum, sejrin naraw il-filmati ta' meta il-vapur, meta il-bastiment telaq minn Southampton. Nkunu magħkom minn hawn ftit ieħor.
Album ritratti lura Lura Fiz-Zmien pajjiż motiħor milli nafjien titħabbet miegħu bla ma trid u kemm nixtieq impara l-ftit li jerġa' dak iż-żmien mill-ġdid li jerġa' dak iż-żmien mill-ġdid